You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. I've got to start with a really interesting report from Jonathan Alexander of the Charlotte Observer. According to him, the Panthers will meet with Cam Newton today about coming back and playing quarterback. Joe Person, who covers the Panthers for The Athletic, seconded that notion by saying that an agreement is near. Now, will Cam Newton start the second that he puts pen to paper? We don't know yet. The guy has been out of the NFL all year. Didn't exactly set the world on fire with the Patriots. Only threw 8 touchdowns, threw 10 interceptions. Lost his job to Mac Jones because he was an idiot and didn't get vaccinated. But this is really interesting. Cam Newton going back to the Panthers. Think about this for a minute. What was one of the first things that Matt Rule did when he got to the Panthers? He cut Newton in order to sign Teddy Bridgewater to a big contract. A year later, he traded Bridgewater to the Broncos, traded for Sam Darnold. Now Darnold's on injured reserve with a fractured scapula. So that's opened the door for Newton to come back. Talk about eating crow. Hey, sorry I cut you. Do you want to come back and maybe save our season? Like, in all fairness to the Panthers, they're only a half game behind the Falcons for that final wildcard spot in the NFC. If Cam Newton comes back and looks great, I could see them sneaking into the playoffs. The NFC is weird. It's very top-heavy. You've got the 5 best teams in the NFL. The Cardinals, Packers, Buccaneers, Cowboys, and Rams. In no particular order. But those are the 5 best teams in the NFL. I'm putting them ahead of the Ravens, ahead of the Bills, ahead of the Titans, any other team. Once you get past those 5 teams, it falls off considerably. The Saints aren't world beaters, the Falcons aren't world beaters, the Panthers aren't world beaters, the Vikings aren't world beaters, the Seahawks, even with Russell Wilson, aren't world beaters, the 49ers definitely aren't world beaters. We're going to have teams missing the playoffs in the AFC. And we're going to say about some of those teams that they're better than the final two playoff teams in the NFC. The Browns, Bengals, and Broncos are all better than the Saints and Falcons. The Saints and Falcons are in the playoffs if the season ends today. The Browns, Bengals, and Broncos are out of the playoffs if the season ends today. So it is interesting. Will Cam Newton come back and start? The smart money seems to be on Newton going back to the Panthers. You take a look at the Panthers quarterbacks. It's Sam Darnold, who's hurt, P.J. Walker, not a world beater by any stretch, in his only extended action this year, which came against the Giants in Week 7, he completed just 3 of his 14 passes for 33 yards. He was sacked 3 times. Last year, when he played, he didn't set the world on fire. The Panthers won the game that he started, but that's because the Lions were absolutely dreadful. They got shut out. The Panthers' defense was outstanding. They didn't win that game because of P.J. Walker. They won that game because of their defense and the fact that the Lions were dreadful. Walker completed 24 of his 34 passes for 258 yards. Pretty darn good. But he only threw 1 touchdown to 2 interceptions, and he put the ball on the ground once. I don't like that. That's not a great performance. You can do a lot better than P.J. Walker. The Panthers did bring in Matt Barkley, who, if nothing else, is a veteran. He's been in the NFL since 2013. Yeah, he's bounced around a lot. Yeah, he hasn't been good, but at least he's a veteran. That's basically the nicest thing I can say about Matt Barkley. You don't want him playing. There is an opening for Cam Newton to come in and make an impact. Now, let me throw a scenario at you. I don't think Newton's going to start on Sunday. I just don't see how that happens. We're too close to game day. Walker's been getting reps with the ones. Maybe Newton will be the backup. It wouldn't stun me if when Newton put pen to paper, the Panthers immediately cut Matt Barkley. That wouldn't surprise me. But I don't see how Newton starts on Sunday. Let me throw a scenario at you. For whatever reason, the Panthers decide to start Newton next week. After the Panthers get destroyed by the Cardinals, they're going to play Washington. You know who coaches Washington? Ron Rivera. How great would that be? Ron Rivera going up against Cam Newton. I really think that could happen. And Washington's not that good. The Panthers can win that game. After that, they have the Dolphins. The Dolphins aren't that good. The Panthers can win that game. After that, they have their bye week. Then they play the Falcons. That game is going to be in North Carolina. The Panthers can beat them. The Falcons game is at the beginning of the timeline that the Panthers gave for when Sam Darnold may be ready to come back. So odds are he's not going to play against the Falcons. Usually, when teams give those timelines, the early mark is if everything goes right and if they want to rush him back. Seeing as though Sam Darnold has a lengthy injury history, the fact that he hasn't looked good at all, and the fact that the Panthers just officially signed Cam Newton, I'm not kidding, as I'm recording this, the Panthers made the contract official, so Newton is back where it all began. I don't think they're going to have Darnold back under center against the Falcons. He could be back the week after against the Bills, but that raises an interesting decision for Matt Rule. Under this hypothetical that I'm throwing out, the Panthers have gone 3-0 under Cam Newton. They've lost to the Cardinals, but that was with P.J. Walker under center. So you've got Newton under center against Washington. Win. Newton under center against the Dolphins. Win. Bye week. Newton under center against the Falcons. In Charlotte. I think that's a win for the Panthers. I can see them winning that game. So how do you go back to Darnold? How do you say to your fan base that you're going back to a quarterback that had lost 5 of his last 6 games, that looked absolutely dead to the world in those games, and we're benching a franchise icon, someone who won an MVP here, and in his return has gone undefeated? You can't do it. The fans would riot. I mean, I understand that if you're a Rule, you made the decision to trade for Darnold, and one of the first things you did when you got to the Panthers was cut Cam Newton. So yeah, maybe you're eating a little bit of crow by starting Newton with Darnold at 100%. But I'll tell you right now, if I'm a Panthers fan, I'd rather have a coach that eats crow than doubles down on a mistake. You made a terrible decision to trade for Sam Darnold. Okay, I knew that wouldn't work. I went on this show and said that April 5th, 2021 would be one of the best days in Jets franchise history. The day they moved on from Darnold and basically guaranteed that Zach Wilson would be their quarterback. So far, I'm right about the first half. The second half is up in the air. Mike White is going to start on Sunday, and if White looks great, you'd be hard-pressed to go back to Wilson. But you cross that bridge when you get there. I agree with Robert Saleh in that regard. So look, Rule made the wrong decision in trading for Darnold. And it's tough to go back to Newton when one of the first things you did as Grand Poobah of the Panthers was cut him. But again, I'd rather you be willing to say that you made a mistake, shouldn't have traded for Darnold, should have stuck with Newton, I got it wrong, but now I see the error in my ways. Better late than never. I mean, I'll say this in Rule's defense. I understood the decision to cut Newton. You gotta remember, in 2019, he only played in 2 games. He got hurt. He missed basically the whole season. And in those 2 games, he did not look good. I mean, he was on the wrong side of 30 at that point. The MVP season was really a distant memory at that point. It had been 4 years since the Panthers had won a playoff game. I understood the decision to move on from Newton. And I definitely understood the decision to sign Teddy Bridgewater. I like Bridgewater. I understand that you're never going to win a Super Bowl with him unless you have an elite defense. But I liked what I saw from him with the Saints. Even with the Panthers, he wasn't terrible. Like, there was no universe where I thought Teddy Bridgewater was a worse quarterback than Sam Darnold. And you're seeing that now. Bridgewater has completed over 70% of his passes. He's thrown 14 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions. 3 of those interceptions came in 1 game. You look at Darnold, he's completed 59.5% of his passes. He's only thrown 7 touchdowns, and he's leading the NFL in picks with 11. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It honestly upsets me that I saw this coming. Like, I went on this show and said this wouldn't work. No one listened to me. I can't tell you how many people said, "Oh, Jacob, you're crazy. Now that Darnold's away from Gase, he'll be great. He's with 2 offensive geniuses in Matt Rule and Joe Brady. Look at all the talent that's there. You've got Christian McCaffrey. You've got Robbie Anderson. You've got DJ Moore. This is going to work out." It's gone about as poorly as it possibly could. I mean, there's no question about it. I've been proven right. Matt Rule has been proven wrong. I mean, I do give Rule credit for acknowledging that he made a mistake. When you have a guy like Newton sitting in free agency, someone who means that much to your franchise, and someone who is better than PJ Walker and Matt Barkley put together, you owe it to your team and your fans to sign that guy. And Newton got a decent chunk of change. A 1-year deal worth $4.5 million. Incentives can push this deal up to $10 million. I commend Rule for not doubling down on his mistake. For giving Newton as much time as he possibly can to learn the playbook, and for giving him a legitimate chance to start the final 7 games. Again, he's not going to start on Sunday, so I'm excluding that game. I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to Newton now. This guy's gotten a second chance to prove that he has what it takes to be an NFL quarterback in 2021. He had the Patriots job locked up. There's no way that Mac Jones starts if Newton doesn't miss the time that he missed because he was unvaccinated. Now he's vaccinated, so better late than never, I guess. I mean, when life kicks you in the butt, that's usually the best motivator to get someone to change their ways. I mean, now Newton's gotten another chance. There's no reason that he can't dominate. The first 3 games that he may start are against bad teams. Washington, the Dolphins, and the Falcons. Don't let the Falcons fool you. They're not that good. And with that game being in Charlotte, that's a winnable game for the Panthers. So if you win those games and you go 3-0, and you look really darn good in those games, there's no way that Rule can go back to Darnold. If you struggle, if you lose those games, if PJ Walker needs to go back under center, then yeah, it's the return of Darnold. The onus is on Cam Newton to show why Matt Rule made a mistake in cutting him, and to show every NFL team why they should have signed him. Every single team could have signed this guy. The Jets could have signed him. They could have signed him right after the Wilson injury. Instead of trading for Joe Flacco, Newton could have started against the Bengals, and we never know the legend of Mike White. By the way, I just put an autographed football card of him in my office. You know where it is? It's sitting on top of the case that's covering my Zach Wilson autographed football. I'm not kidding. It's going to be very interesting to see what Cam Newton does. I really hope he starts at least 1 game. He should start 3 before Darnold's ready to go. But he better get the chance to start at least 1. How sad would that be? Newton goes back to the Panthers and doesn't play a single game. That'd be terrible. I want to see Newton go back to the Panthers and just ball out. I like Newton. I have nothing against him. There's a great fit for him. Great move for the Panthers. It makes a ton of sense. But now it's time to preview Ravens-Dolphins. A game that may be hard to get into, but this is the NFL. Any team can be better than any other team on any given day of the week. It's okay if you think this game is going to be a blowout. It's okay if you're going to have a tough time getting into it. But we just saw the Jaguars beat the Bills 9-6. If that can happen, anything can happen. I've defended Lamar Jackson a lot on this show. He's the quarterback on both my fantasy teams, so I kind of have to. But he is having another great season. So far, he's completed 65% of his passes for 2,209 yards, 13 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Maybe that's not the greatest touchdown to interception ratio, but he is leading the NFL in yards per completion with 12.8. He has 4 fourth-quarter comebacks and 4 game-winning drives. That leads the NFL. He also has 97 carries for 600 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's actually leading the NFL in yards per carry with 6.2. If Jackson does lead the NFL in yards per carry, it'll be the 3rd straight year that he's done that. You know how many people have done that in NFL history? 4. Ernie Cattle for the Detroit Lions in the mid-30s when football was incredibly different. Lenny Moore in the mid-50s for the Baltimore Colts, Hall of Famer. Marshall Faulk in the late 90s and early 2000s. We all remember how great he was. And Michael Vick in the mid-2000s. We all remember how great he was. I mean, he is without question one of the most exciting players in the NFL. In fact, he may be the most exciting player in the NFL. Seeing the step back that the Chiefs have taken this year, and the fact that Mahomes has thrown some really out-of-character interceptions, you can make the argument that Jackson has eclipsed Mahomes as the most exciting player in football. Not saying I agree with that, I'm just saying you can make that argument. You can also make the argument that the Baltimore Ravens will represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. They are 6-2. They are the 2 seed right now. The only team that's ahead of them is the Tennessee Titans. And without Derrick Henry, I have no faith in that Titans team. You want to tell me you're going with the Bills? Totally get that. Fair pick. No argument. But the Ravens are in that conversation. And the primary reason that they're in that conversation is the dominance of Lamar Jackson. He can kill you with his arm, he can kill you with his legs, he can do everything. The one knock on him is that he doesn't have any playoff success. But it took Peyton Manning a while before he learned how to win. It took John Elway a while to learn how to win. Those guys both ended up with 2 Super Bowls. The story of Lamar Jackson has not been completed yet. You want to tell me that right now he's on the trajectory to being mentioned in the same breath as guys like Dan Marino and Jim Kelly? That's fair. I can't argue with you. But if you were to tell me right now that that's guaranteed, I disagree with you immensely. The guy's 24. He's got a lot of football ahead of him. We all know who his 2 big receiving weapons are, Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. Hollywood Brown is one of the best young receivers in the NFL, and Mark Andrews is one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Maybe he's not in the Travis Kelce and George Kittle tier, but he's right below them. The Ravens' offensive line is really, really good. It doesn't get talked about enough. It's one of the best in the NFL. Alejandro Villanueva, Ben Powers, Bradley Bozeman, Kevin Zeitler, and Patrick McCarry are all incredibly talented. Although, to be fair, McCarry is doubtful for tonight's game. He has an ankle injury. So that means at right tackle, you'll probably see Tyre Phillips. A guy who's had a decent sophomore season. Did not have a good rookie year, but he's taken a step forward in his sophomore year. That's really all you can ask for. He wasn't awful against the Vikings last week. He played every snap. Wasn't great, wasn't terrible. I can live with Phillips as the right tackle. Now, defensively, the Ravens are really bad. Like, that's one thing we're not talking about enough. The Ravens this year have given up the 12th most points per game in the NFL at 24.4. This is the Ravens we're talking about. That's very unlike them. You take a look at their 2 losses. Against the Raiders in overtime on Monday Night Football, they gave up 33 points. Against the Bengals a few weeks ago, they gave up 41 points. Wink Martindale is a smart guy, well respected, has a good head on his shoulders. In fact, he got some head coaching buzz in the last cycle, but this defense has been atrocious. I mean, who are the players that scare you on defense for the Ravens? Calais Campbell, but even then he doesn't have a sack. He throws the quarterback off schedule, that's about it. Marlon Humphrey, who's very good. No issues with him. Jason Oweh, Tyus Bowser, and Chuck Clark. That may be it. And even then, Oweh, Bowser, and Clark are good. Not great, good. The Ravens have an Achilles heel. It can prevent them from doing special things in the playoffs. But it's not because Lamar Jackson isn't a money quarterback. It's because their defense is really, really bad. But that really shouldn't matter against the Dolphins. A really bad team. You know you're bad when you're playing at home, but you're a 7.5 point underdog. Then again, I really shouldn't be talking because the Jets are 12-point underdogs against the Bills. It seems like Jacoby Brissett is going to get the start tonight. And Brissett hasn't been awful. He's had to start 4 games this year. Tua's been banged up. Like, has Tua taken a step forward this year? Yes and no. Maybe by the eye test he has, but the Dolphins are only 1-4 in games that he started, compared to 6-3 last year. And Tua's been really banged up. There's a reason that the Dolphins were so heavily linked to Deshaun Watson. So now it's on Brissett. A decent quarterback, someone who you can put in and expect him to hold his own. I mean, he got the start last week against the Texans, and he got the win. He completed 26 of his 43 passes for 244 yards and a touchdown. Granted, he threw 2 picks, but at least he got the win. He has starting experience. We know that. He's not terrible, but it's hard to get really excited about him. Myles Gaskin is their running back. Solid. I don't hate him. I don't love him, though. Only has 1 touchdown, 3.5 yards per carry, which isn't that good. Like, it's kind of weird. He had a really good sophomore season, but this year, he's fallen off a cliff. Some good pass catchers, though. Mike Gesicki is one of the better tight ends in the league. 44 catches for 529 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jalen Waddle's having a really good rookie season. 56 catches for 496 yards and 3 touchdowns. Devontae Parker's good, but he's hurt. So it is kind of interesting if you stop and think about it. Both these teams, the Ravens and Dolphins, have really good tight ends. One really good receiver, and that's about it. The Dolphins' offensive line is absolutely putrid. According to Pro Football Focus, they only have one offensive lineman with an overall grade over 62. That is Robert Jones. He has a 92.4 overall grade, which is outstanding. Doesn't get much better than that. You know how many snaps he's played in this year? 7. What am I supposed to do with that? Their defense has some good players. I like Emmanuel Ogbah. I like Zach Seiler. I love Christian Wilkins. I like Brennan Scarlett. I really like Javon Holland. I like Eric Rowe. Those are good players. But the Dolphins this year have the 6th worst defense in the NFL in terms of points per game. They are giving up 26.9 points per game. Their head coach, Brian Flores, was formerly the linebackers coach for the Patriots. He was their de facto defensive coordinator. He was the play caller. Went to the Dolphins with a great reputation. Defensive guru, smart guy, very young, but wise beyond his years. I was never crazy about him. I've seen this fail before. The Belichick assistants just don't work. Seriously, is there a Bill Belichick disciple that has worked out in the NFL as a head coach? Romeo Crennel, no. Good defensive coordinator, not a head coach. Brian Flores, no. Al Groh, no. Maybe he could have been, but he left for Virginia after 1 year with the Jets. Joe Judge, no. Eric Mangini, no. Josh McDaniels, no. Matt Patricia, no. Nick Saban, not in the NFL. College, yes. NFL, no. Jim Schwartz, no. You know who the best NFL head coach may be that's a Belichick disciple? Bill O'Brien. A guy who's currently out of the NFL. A guy who's only 4 games over 500. I like Bill O'Brien. I think he's a good head coach. I think he's gotten a bad rap. But I've got to be fair. To be only 4 games over 500? To have been run out of Houston on a rail? If that's the best Belichick has, that's not that good. Dear all NFL teams, stop hiring Belichick disciples. They do not work. Hire Andy Reid disciples. Namely, Eric Bieniemy. Although, given how the Chiefs are doing this year, I can understand not wanting to hire him. There is no question that the Ravens will win this game. This is going to be a rout. This is going to be a blowout. Very tough game to get into. Baltimore will win. Alright, now I'll give you some college football Valk talk. We've got one game set for tonight that features a ranked team. UNC will travel to Pittsburgh to play the Panthers. This is going to be a really good quarterback matchup. Sam Howell versus Kenny Pickett. A lot of teams are going to have scouts at this game. I know some GMs are going to be there. I mean, this is a big opportunity for both these guys. If they ball out with the entire college football world watching, their draft stock goes up instantly. Now, I'm a big Sam Howell fan. He can kill you with his arm. He's completed over 63% of his passes for over 2,400 yards and 20 touchdowns. And he can kill you with his legs. He has just under 700 rushing yards to go along with 8 touchdowns. I mean, I love this kid. I have a low first-round grade on him. I like him more than Desmond Ridder and Malik Willis. Granted, a lot can change between now and the NFL draft. We have 5 months, but at this very moment, I have Howell ahead of Ridder and Willis. Ty Chandler is having a sensational year. He has 884 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns. Last week, he absolutely killed Wake Forest. He had 22 carries for 213 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was really good at Tennessee. He's been great at UNC. Josh Downs is one of the best receivers in the nation. He has 74 catches for 1,014 yards and 8 touchdowns. Antoine Green is having a good year, 419 yards and 3 touchdowns. UNC has a good offense. In terms of points per game, they have the 12th best offense in the nation. They're averaging just under 39 points per game. Give Mac Brown a ton of credit. Defensively, UNC really hasn't put it all together, which is really surprising since they have some talented players. Cameron Kelly, Tomon Fox, Giovanni Biggers, Raymond Vohasek, Tomari Fox, Kamon Rucker. Those guys are good. It's kind of surprising that UNC hasn't been able to put it all together on defense. Their 2 defensive coordinators are Jay Bateman and Tommy Thigpen. I'd be very surprised if those guys returned. Maybe make Dre Bly the defensive coordinator. That'd be pretty good. College Football Hall of Famer. Had a good NFL career, made a couple Pro Bowls. I could see that working. Now, Pittsburgh's a team that hasn't gotten a lot of love. And it's really surprising to me because they're one of the most well-rounded teams in the nation. They have the best offense in the nation in terms of points per game. 45 points per game. They have the 45th best defense in the nation in terms of opposing points per game. 22.7 points per game. Pat Narduzzi has done a sensational job with that team. I don't want to say that Pittsburgh is a CFP threat because they're not. They're not going to make it. But whoever they play in their bowl game is going to have their hands full, especially with Kenny Pickett. I mean, here's a guy who is having a Joe Burrow-like year. Not as dominant as Burrow, but it's Burrow-like in the sense that no one saw this guy coming, and now he's having a year for the ages. He's completed over 68% of his passes. He already has over 3,100 passing yards, 29 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. In his most recent big board, Mel Kiper had Pickett as his number 1 quarterback. And I don't think that's an insane argument, I'd probably put Matt Corral ahead of Pickett. But again, a lot can change. We have bowl games to get through, the combine, pro days, a lot of stuff. But Kenny Pickett has the makings of a really good NFL quarterback. The Panthers have a great two-headed monster at running back in Israel Abanikanda and Vincent Davis. They have a couple really talented receivers in Jordan Addison and Jared Wayne. Taysom Mack is good too, but he's questionable with an arm injury. He didn't play last week. Doesn't seem like he's going to play this week. Pittsburgh's defense is really talented. Kalijah Cansey, Habakkuk Baldonado, Marquise Williams, Phil Campbell III, John Petroshen, and Brandon Hill are all really, really talented. This is going to be a really good game. I'm looking forward to this game. It's kind of rare that we get a college football game during the week that's this good. But this has the makings of a really, really, really good game. Having said that, I think Pittsburgh's the better team. This game is at Heinz Field. You know Panthers fans are going to be out in force. I've got to go with Pittsburgh. Moving on now to UConn making a really surprising hire. If you'll recall, earlier this year, they fired Randy Edsall. Now, Edsall had a really good run at UConn once upon a time, but in his second go-round, he was absolutely dreadful. He spent 4 years there, technically 5, but last year UConn didn't have a team. He never finished with more than 3 wins. It was absolutely terrible. UConn made a splash when they brought Edsall back. They are making another splash by bringing in Jim Mora Jr. to be their new head coach. I mean, if you were to tell me that a former NFL head coach would take over the Huskies, I would have said you were crazy. I mean, say what you want about Mora as an NFL head coach, but he had some good years with the Falcons. His first year there, they went 11-5. They won the division. They made it to the NFC title game. Granted, after that, they fell off 8-8 and 7-9. But that's not bad. His 1 year with the Seahawks, he was really bad, okay? And that opened the door for Pete Carroll. No question about that. After that, Mora went to UCLA, had 4 really good seasons, fell off his last couple seasons. He had actually been out of football since being fired from the Bruins. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Mora is able to come back after being out of football for 3.5 seasons. I mean, I think this can work. And if you're UConn and Jim Mora says he's interested in coaching you, you need to take it. I don't care what hotshot coordinator you find. If you convince a coach from a smaller school to move up in the ranks, you'd be hard-pressed to find a bigger name than Jim Mora. And look, in college, name value means something. It helps with recruiting a ton. I mean, if I'm making a choice for where I'm going to play college football, and I can play for Jim Mora, who has had success in the NFL, versus another coach with a worse track record, I may pick UConn. I mean, it's going to be a really tough rebuild for the Huskies. They play in the middle of nowhere, Storrs, Connecticut, impossible to get to. Obviously more known as a basketball school. I don't want to say it's impossible that Mora can right the ship. The thing is, though, it's going to take a while. And what we've seen from Mora in the past is that he can wear out his welcome. 3 years with the Falcons, a bad end to his run at UCLA. It's going to be interesting to see how this works out. I like Mora. I think this can work. But it does come with some risk. There's no question about that. Alright, now I'll give you some NBA Valk talk. Specifically on an interesting report by Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report. According to him, David Griffin is on the hot seat. Something that I said was a distinct possibility before the season started. This guy is on his third head coach in 3 years. The Pelicans really haven't taken that jump that anyone thought they would after drafting Zion and surrounding him with really good young talent, guys like Lonzo and Brandon Ingram. He let Lonzo walk. He's now a Bull. Look at where the Bulls are. They're second in the East. Lonzo is having a really good season. He's shooting the ball efficiently. He's shooting 44.7% from beyond the arc. Is that sustainable? Probably not. But I think it's a fair bet to say that he's going to finish with a higher three-point percentage than he's ever finished with before. That's a bad job by David Griffin in not surrounding him with the guidance needed to find his shot. I mean, you take a look at his drafts, they really haven't worked out outside of Zion. Jackson Hayes hasn't been anything special. Kira Lewis hasn't been anything special. Nickeil Alexander-Walker has gotten off to a good start. I like him, but it's fair to wonder if that's sustainable. I mean, it really seems like the Pelicans are falling apart at the seams. No Zion. No Brandon Ingram, trading Jrue Holiday, and then seeing him win a title with the Bucks. What did you get for him? Eric Bledsoe. Eric Bledsoe is now a Clipper. It's been an absolute disaster for the Pelicans. Yeah, David Griffin's seat should be hot. But the thing is, though, that's only the start of the teardown. Realize, the new GM is going to want to hire his own coach. So that means bye-bye Willie Green. Zion Williamson will have been in the NBA for 4 seasons. He will be on his 4th head coach. His rookie year, Alvin Gentry. His sophomore year, Stan Van Gundy. His junior year, Willie Green. His senior year, God only knows. He's not going to want to stay with an organization that's going through coaches like it's going out of style. He's going to want to pull a Chris Paul or an Anthony Davis. And I will defend him until the cows come home. Same thing with Brandon Ingram. It's amazing if you stop and think about it. The Pelicans had an incredibly bright future. They had Zion, they had B.I., they had Lonzo, they had DeAndre Hunter, they had Jrue Holiday. The future looked bright. Now, no Lonzo. DeAndre Hunter never played a game for him. He was traded to the Hawks for Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jackson Hayes. No Zion, he's hurt. No B.I., he's hurt. No Holiday, he's a buck. Nothing good in return for Holiday. I just don't see a light at the end of the tunnel for the Pelicans. Even if Zion and B.I. come back, the Pelicans are still missing the playoffs. They've dug too deep a hole for themselves. Does Griffin survive another year of missing the playoffs? Probably not. That means a new GM. The new GM is going to want to hire his own coach. So no Willie Green. If Zion and B.I. don't make trade requests, you've heard the saying, patience of a saint. We're going to change that to patience of a pelican. If I were those guys, I'd want out. I'd want out right now. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. What, another rebuild? I don't want that. I'm wasting away here. You had your chance to pull off a rebuild with me here. You failed. Get me out. Get me to a playoff team. I hate to sound so fatalistic, but I just don't see a light at the end of the tunnel here for the Pelicans. It's going to be incredibly tough sledding for years to come. Tomorrow, you're going to get an interview that I'm going to do with David Kaiser, the author of a book on the 1965 NFL season. On Monday, you're going to get an interview that I'm going to do with Ed Groover, the author of The Ice Bowl. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying that I don't like that it's Veterans Day. We shouldn't need a special day to honor these heroes. Veterans Day.